The Humiliated Father I, Part 4 of 4. Life is thereby left far behind, for, don't forget it, there is something else, something that is emphasized by the dramaturgy with all its force, which is that given what she is, her faithful relationship with human things, to accept to marry Turelure would not only be to give in to a constraint. Marriage, even the most execrable, is an indissoluble marriage. Something that is not yet worth nothing includes adherence to the duty of marriage as a duty to love. When I say life is left far behind, we get proof of this at the point where the play reaches the resolution it has been building up to. Things are thus: Scene has hence yielded. She has become the Baroness of Turelure. It's the day on which the little Turelure is born, the destiny of whom, as you will see, we will be dealing with next time in what is going to happen, the adventures, the climax, and the ending of the drama. It's in a surrounded Paris that Baron Turelure, who has just come to occupy the centre, the historical figurehead of this whole great puppetry of marshals, of which we know from history what are the oscillations, faithful and unfaithful, around the great disaster. It's on this day there that Turelure must, on certain conditions, put the keys of the great city back in the hands of Louis XVIII. The one who is the ambassador of this exchange will be none other than, as you would expect it, and as is necessary for the beauty of the drama, Scene's cousin in person. Of course, the opportunity to add everything that could be most odious in the circumstances is not missed, i.e. that in the conditions, for example, that Turelure puts on his good and profitable betrayal, things are not presented to us in any other way. It will be that in particular the Couffontaine prerogative, meaning what is left of it, I mean the shadow of things, but also what is most essential, i.e. the name of Couffontaine, will be passed on to this misaligned descendancy. With things carried to such a degree, you will not be at all surprised that it finishes in a little attack with pistols, i.e. that once the conditions have been accepted, the cousin, who is otherwise far from not having skimped in getting prepared and in having decided to do his deed, as one says, to the one named Turelure, who himself, of course, being endowed with all the cunning and malign arts, has foreseen the move, and so he also has his little revolver in his pocket. At the time when the clock strikes 3, the 2 revolvers go off, and naturally it is not the villain who ends up hitting the floor. But the essential thing is that Scene de Couffontaine jumps in front of the bullet that is meant to kill her husband, and that she is going to die, in the moments that follow, from having, in summary, saved him from death. Suicide, we would say, and not without good cause, since her whole attitude just as well shows us that she has drunk from the chalice without having encountered anything in the other than what he is, the absolute dereliction, even the proven abandonment of the divine powers, a deliberation that, pushed to its limits to this degree, hardly merits to be called a sacrifice. In short, in the last scene, before the gesture from which she reaps her death, she is presented to us as agitated with a facial tic, and in some way this signifying the poet's intention to show us that this limit that last year I indicated to you as being acknowledged by de Sade himself, that beauty is impervious to abuse, appears to be in some way exceeded here, and that this grimace of life's sufferings is in some way more detrimental to the status of beauty than the grimace of death with the tongue hanging out that we can evoke in the figure of Antigone when Haemon discovers her. Yet what happens at the end? About what does the poet leave us in suspense at the end of his tragedy? There are 2 endings, and this is what I want you to hold in mind. One of these endings consists in the king's entrance, a buffoon-like entrance in which Turelure of course gets just recompense for his services, and in which the restored order takes on the appearance of this kind of caricatural show, too easily accepted by the audience, given what history has taught us about the results of the Restoration. In short, a kind of épinal image, a satirical caricature, absolutely derisory, that anyway leaves us in no doubt about the judgment that the poet may have in relation to any return to what is called the Ancien Régime. What is of interest is precisely what is in the second ending. It's linked by an intimate equivalence with what the poet is capable of leaving us with in this image, that of the death of Cine de Coufontaine. Not, of course, that it is absent from the first ending. Just before the figure of the king, it is Badilon who reappears in order to exhort Cine, and who, right to the end, can only get a no in absolute refusal of peace, of the surrendering, the offering of herself to God, who is going to take in her soul. All the exhortations of the saint, torn apart himself by the ultimate consequences of that which he had been the instigator, failing, coming up against a final negation. Cine, who cannot find from any angle anything that reconciles her with a fatality that, please note, goes beyond everything that could be called ananke, force, constraint, necessity, in ancient tragedy. That which Mr. Ricoeur, who I've noticed was studying the same things as me in Antigone at about the same moment, calls the malicious God function. The malicious God of ancient tragedy is still something that is linked to man via the intermediary of ate, of this named, articulated aberration of which it is the organizer, that is linked to something, to this ate of the other, as Antigone, correctly speaking, says, and as Créon says in the Sophoclean tragedy, without either of them coming to the seminar, this ate of the other has a meaning in which the destiny of Antigone is inscribed. Here we are beyond all meaning. The sacrifice of Cine de Coufontaine only leads to the absolute derision of her goals. Right up to the end of the trilogy, the old man that it was a question of snatching from the claws of the usurper will only be represented for us, the total father superior of the faithful that he is, as an impotent father who, in relation to the ideals that he puts forward, has nothing to offer them except the vain repetition of traditional words, but without any power. The restored so-called legitimacy is nothing but a lure, fiction, caricature, and, in reality, a prolongation of the subverted order. What the poet adds in the second ending is this discovery in which we meet again, as it were, his challenge to have Cine de Coufontaine be beseeched with the words of her own weaponry, her motto, that are for her the signification of her life, Coufontaine adsum, Coufontaine here I am, but Turlure himself who, in front of his wife, who is incapable of speaking or refusing to speak, tries at least to obtain a kind of sign, if only as consent, to the arrival of the new being, a sign of recognition of the fact that the gesture she has made was to protect him, Turlure. To all this the martyr only replies, right up till she succumbs, with a no. What does it mean that the poet brings us to this extreme failure, derision of the signifier itself as such? What does it mean for such a thing to be presented to us? For it seems to me that I have sufficiently walked you through the levels of what I will call this enormity. You will tell me that you are hard to impress, i.e. that, after all, people make you see enough of every kind of thing such that nothing shocks you, but, all the same, I know that there is, to a certain extent, something in common between Claudel's poetry and that of the Surrealists, but what we cannot doubt in any case is that Claudel, at least, imagines that he knows what he is writing. In any event, it is written. Such a thing was able to come to light in the human imagination. For us, the audience, we know very well that it is only a question here of representing for us a topic by analogy, of which we have also been ear-bashed about in relation to the romantic conflicts of the French 19th century. We know very well that it is about something else, that it is not this that touches us, that holds us, that leaves us in suspense, that we are attached to, that projects us from the hostage onwards in the sequence of the trilogy. There is something else in this image, faced with which we lack the right terms. What is presented to us here, according to the formula that I introduced to you last year as di elu kai phobu, to use Aristotle's terms, meaning not through terror and pity, but by traversing every terror and by overcoming every pity, gets us even further from the point here. It is an image of a desire in relation to which only a Sardian reference, it would seem, remains valid. This substitution of the image of a woman for the sign of the Christian cross, does it not seem to you that it has not only indicated it here, you will see it in the text in the most explicit way, for the image of the crucifix is in the background right from the beginning of the play, and we discover it again in the following play. But, furthermore, does the coincidence of this theme not strike you, insofar as it is utterly erotic, with something here that is, namely, and without it being anything else, another thread, another point of reference that allows us to pinpoint the whole intrigue and the whole scenario as that of the passing over of the whole made beyond all value in faith? This play, apparently of belief, and of which believers and the most eminent Bananas himself turn away from as blasphemous, is this not for us an indication of new meaning being given to human tragedy? This is what I will try to show you with the other two episodes in the trilogy next time.